Iran fires missiles at US base in Qatar. Swift retaliation, symbolic yet calculated. In a dramatic escalation of the Middle East standoff, Iran launched a limited missile strike against the US Udeid Air Base in Qatar, in direct retaliation for recent American airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Though no casualties have been reported, the event reveals a carefully calibrated interplay of power, brinkmanship, and renewed calls for diplomacy. What happened? Missile strike details. The Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC Aerospace Force, launched a volley of 19 short and medium-range ballistic missiles, codenamed Operation Glad Tidings of Victory, targeting Al Udeid Air Base, the largest US base in the region, with some 10,000 personnel. Qatar's air defense systems intercepted the majority of missiles, and US officials confirmed that no Americans were harmed. President Trump described the strike as very weak and stated that Iran provided advance warning, enabling them to protect lives and assets. Strategic intent, symbolism over destruction. Iran's actions reflected a deliberate, measured posture. By launching the same number of missiles as the bombs the US dropped during Operation Midnight Hammer, strikes on the Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan nuclear sites, Iran sent a message of tit-for-tat parity, not disproportionate aggression. Delivering a pre-attack warning allowed them to signal restraint and logic, aimed at minimizing casualties and broader escalation. This mirrors Iran's post-Soleimani strike tactics in 2020, avoiding direct confrontation while still delivering a strong political message. Qatar closed its airspace promptly, and the US issued shelter-in-place advisories showing coordinated tracking of missile launches. In the run-up, the US had already redeployed aircraft from Al Udeid, possibly removing strategic bombers, and bolstered missile defenses across the Gulf, including fighter jets and Patriot systems. Qatari air defenses intercepted most missiles. One missile struck a perimeter area of the base, causing minimal damage and no US casualties. Wider conflict context. The missile assault follows a series of joint US-Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, including Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan on June 22nd. Concurrently, Israel targeted Iranian infrastructure, from Tehran's Evin prison to Revolutionary Guard command posts, raising casualties in Iran and deepening regional tensions. Iran's missile response was sharply focused on US military assets, avoiding civilian population centers or direct Iranian fatalities, underscoring the strategic symbolism of the act. Market and strategic fallout. Oil prices briefly dropped approximately 4–7%, as markets saw the strike as symbolic, rather than destructive and unlikely to disrupt the Strait of Hormuz. Stock indices rose, reflecting investor confidence that the confrontation may not escalate into full-scale war. Regional airspaces in the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar closed briefly, disrupting flights, yet commercial disruptions were limited. Diplomatic and legal implications. Qatar condemned the strike as a violation of its sovereignty and has reserved the right to respond. Global leaders, including the UN, EU, and Gulf states, called for calm and diplomacy, warning of regional instability despite Iran's measured use of force. Legal scholars observe that Iran's approach, retaliation proportional to the US strike and issued with warning, may skirt the edge of international legal norms, though sovereignty was nonetheless violated. Strategic analysis, why it matters. Symbolic symmetry. Matching bomb-to-missile ratios signifies strategic parity, underlining Iran's ability to retaliate while signaling limits, minimizing escalation risk. Early warnings, selecting a purely military target and avoiding casualties, suggest Iran aims for deterrence, not war. US calculated restraint. President Trump refrained from immediate counterstrike, calling the attack very weak and stressing readiness to escalate if provoked. Proxy and cyber playbook. Experts warn Tehran could resort to proxies, like Hezbollah or Houthi forces, maritime harassment, or cyber attacks instead of overt military action. Diplomatic narrowing. Following the barrage, Trump announced a 12-hour phased ceasefire plan between Israel and Iran, opening a brief diplomatic window amid mounting global pressure. Short term. Expect continued US defensive positioning, Gulf airspace management, and close monitoring of potential proxy skirmishes around Iraq, Lebanon, or the Arabian Sea. Mid-term, diplomatic channels, particularly via Qatar, the UN, or European mediators, could drive a limited de-escalation, buoyed by mutual interest in avoiding another large-scale military confrontation. Long-term, strategic parity with proportional missile threat suggests Iran is reinforcing its deterrence doctrine, while the US appears to be calibrating its messaging to contain escalation without appearing weak. The missile strike at Al Udeid was retaliatory, but restrained Iran hit hard enough to show force, but carefully enough to avoid war. With no US casualties reported, air defenses in place, and Trump publicly downplaying the strike, the region remains on a knife's edge, balanced between escalation and an uneasy ceasefire. The outcome will depend on two critical factors: Iran's next signals, whether via proxies, cyber, or diplomacy, and Washington's willingness to couple military vigilance with renewed diplomatic outreach. For now, the international community holds its breath.